recent death of Timothy Piazza at the Beta Theta Pi fraternity house, the fate of the historic Penn State landmark hangs in the balance. With the fraternity banned forever from Penn State, the 26,000 square foot house worth millions remains vacant. 6 News dove deep into the complex legal battles and questions surrounding the property. Here's Matt Baumgarten.
220 North Burroughs Road, the longtime home of one of Penn State's most prestigious fraternities, empty. It is no longer the home of Beta Theta Pi. Penn State administrators say it never will be again. They took the drastic step after what happened inside here, the death of sophomore pledge Timothy Piazza. The house now has an uncertain future. It's been a staple of the Penn State Greek community since the early 1900s. It's up to the courts to decide who the rightful owner is. Now it's in the hands of the Alpha Upsilon chapter of Beta Theta Pi. There's a pending lawsuit against the fraternity filed by Penn State Beta alum and real estate mogul Donald Abbey. In the suit, Abbey says he loaned more than $10 million to the fraternity for renovations. He says the money now needs to be repaid since the fraternity was dissolved. The lawsuit says a funding agreement by Abbey required the chapter to remain an active fraternity. Abbey declined to speak on camera about the pending litigation. According to court documents, Abbey is seeking nearly $11 million. It also asks for a lien to be placed on the property in his favor if the fraternity can't pay him back within 60 days. The house owners have since filed a response to the lawsuit. They say the $10 million were not loans, but donations. So what role does Penn State play in all of this? According to the deed, they may have a right to buy back the house.
There are some deed restriction language in place related to when the property was given land by the university back, I believe, in the 20s.
Included in the deeds were a clause that said if they stopped functioning as a fraternity, the university could buy the property at fair market value.
That's something different fraternity alums like Sandy DeVinny say they know all too well. His fraternity, Phi Delta Theta, went through a similar situation of their own when their charter was revoked. They relied on the rules of perpetuity to settle their lawsuit.
If all of the parties who signed the original deed have been deceased for over 21 years, the rule is that any claim to the property is not valid.
Which could play a role in Beta's situation.
In other words, Penn State no longer has a horse in the race on the property. It's highly unlikely that anyone who signed that deed is still alive.
When asked about the university's plan of action, Penn State released this statement to 6 News saying, quote, "Our focus continues to be with the behavioral issues within some parts of our fraternity and sorority community that led to the need to permanently withdraw recognition from Beta Theta Pi. The future of that privately owned house, which is located in the borough of State College, not on campus, is an open question, but not one in which we are directly involved just now," end quote. Solving the ownership issue could take time.
Unfortunately, the wheels of justice don't move swiftly. So, how that's going to turn out is a real, $64 million question.
There's one last thing to look at. What can the Beta House become once all that is figured out? Well, the house sits in a State College borough zone. It's not technically on Penn State's campus. Specifically, it sits in Subdistrict 5 of the University Planning District.
We have the fraternity located here in Subdistrict 5, and this land, along with all the land in the borough, is subject to our zoning ordinance.
In Subdistrict 5, there's a sort of a long list of permitted uses, and then also a list of uses that are not permitted in the district.
Potential uses include things like another fraternity or sorority house, a hospital, a hotel or inn, professional, corporate, or government offices, or even a restaurant. It can't be non-student housing, an airport, or a retirement community, just to name a few. But this isn't a case where the borough just decides what goes there.
But let's say that the current fraternity ownership sold to another fraternity that is recognized by the university. They can move in there, and we've been asked, well, could you stop that from happening? And the answer is no.
There are occasionally some issues.
Sometimes there's gray area. You can't write an ordinance for every possibility.
I also reached out to Beta Theta Pi's legal counsel for their take on all this. I never got a response. Other sources close to the situation I talked to say this could take years to decide. In State College, Matt Baumgarten, 6 News.
Ahead, a ceremony to